open up your file manager, and I want you to go to some random directory that you'd like to write your code in. Okay, so for me, it'll be this directory right here. So yeah, just right click and create a new folder and name it whatever you want. For me, I'm gonna name it Python Basics. Okay, so I'm gonna name it Python Basics, leave it like that. Go back to VS Code, open VS Code again, go to file right here and go to open folder right here. That should open up your file manager, and just go to your directory that you chose before. For me, it's right here, so Python Basics right there, and click on OK right here. Now you've got your directory open. Now we need to create our first Python file. Click on the plus icon right here to create a new file, not a new folder, a new file. Okay, so new file, just name it something like main.py. Now make sure you add this .py right here. Now you've got main.py. Now we can actually start writing Python code. Now the first thing I want to tell you guys about are Python variables. Okay, so in order to make a comment, now what is a comment before I actually talk about comments? Now in order to make a comment, you just need to press hash. Okay, so put the hashtag symbol before the sentence or before whatever you want to put in there. Now comments are things that the programming language will not take into consideration when reading a code. Okay, so this is like you telling Python, no, do not look at this. This is not for you, it's only for me. So this is only for us in order to explain to ourselves what's happening in the code. Okay, so right here, as you can see, I've typed in hashtag variable. Now this is telling me that what we are doing right here is just variables. Okay, so variables are gonna be intense, actually very simple. Now basically what variables are is the things that we use in order to store the things that we want to keep. Okay, so we can say a variable is basically a piece of paper. Okay, and what we want to store in that piece of paper is some writing. Okay, so whatever we write in the piece of paper, when we call out that page number, so let's say we call our piece of paper page 1. Now when we call out page 1 will give us everything in page 1. Now that's what a variable is. Hope that's a good illustration. Okay, yeah, so a variable is basically a page with the information that you want kept in that page. Now what can be stored in a variable is actually a lot of things. You can store data types, which I'm going to tell you guys about right now. Okay, so let's just go through an example of a variable. So we can say a is equal to a string type, my name is Anthony CJA, like that. Okay, so that right there is a variable for this whole sentence right here. You get it? So now next time we want to use our name, we don't have to type our full name. Now we can just do something like this, print. Now a print statement in Python is something that gives us the things that we put inside into the terminal. So it basically tells Python, okay, thank you for for keeping this stuff. Now can I please have my information back in the terminal? So once we do that print statement, we're gonna run the program. Now running the program, we run it with this run button right here. So just click on run and it should open up the terminal like magic. And guess what? My name is Anthony CJA, of course. Okay, so that is what a variable is. Now in case you're wondering, why the hell do I have these right here? Now, let me tell you exactly why we have that. Now this is what we call, we're already moving on to data types, by the way. Actually, let me make a new comment for that so I don't confuse you guys. So these are going to be called data types. Okay, now we're going to be moving on to data types. So we're leaving out variables. I hope you understand what variables are, by the way. Our variables are just things that we use to store our information. Now we can store data types like strings, integers, floating point numbers, booleans in variables. Okay, so now we're going to be using both variables and data types in order to make you guys understand more about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to data types and strings. Now data types, what are they? You already heard me saying something about strings, integers, floating point numbers, booleans. Okay, so those are data types. So let's start off with integers. Okay, so we're gonna say my int. So in case you guys, I forgot to tell you about this actually. So when you are naming your variables in Python, you cannot have a variable as a number. So your variable can't start with a number. So something like this. This cannot be a variable, okay? Your variable also can't have spaces in between. So something like this cannot be a variable, okay? So if you want to have a space in between, make sure you either to add a underscore or something to join the sentence. So you can not use a number as a variable name, should I say. But you can have numbers at the end of the variable, so something like this, my int 1. Okay, so you can have that. So I'm just going to use this int to represent integer. Okay, so let's give our variable an integer. So an integer will be something like 100, and we're just going to put a comment to hashtag integer. So we're just going to name it integer. So now we know that's an integer. So what's an integer? Right, let me again put a print statement right here just to show you guys exactly what we are doing with this. Okay, so this is not right, so we're gonna do that, and we're gonna put a print statement right here, and right here we're gonna take our integer, let's say my int. Now the beauty of using the extension that we installed earlier on is the fact that we get autocomplete. So enter my int, let's say plus 9. That would work because we have an integer and we're adding another integer. So this is basically doing math for us, but we're gonna run the program and see what it gives us right here, 109. So what is 100 plus 9? 109. So that's what happens with integers. So you can add integers into other integers. So let's say we have another integer here. Let's say int2 is equal to 200. Now this is another integer, as you can see. Now we can add these integers together this way. So int plus int2. There we go. Let's run that again. What do we get? 300, because they're both integers, so we can add them together. Now we understand what integers are. Now let's go on to floating point numbers. So we're gonna call this my float. This number can be 20.5. 20.5. Numbers with decimal places, those are floating point numbers. So decimal numbers are floating point numbers. So we're going to call this a float. That's what they're called in Python, okay? So what we can basically do here is add floating point numbers to integers. So that's perfectly fine because it's still both numbers. Let me put it that way. So we're going to say my int plus my float. Watch what that gives us in the terminal, 120.5, okay? So that's a floating point number. Why have a floating point number if you can have an integer? When we're working with things like dividing things, we definitely need floating point numbers. Working with money, we need floating point numbers. In order to get accurate results, we need floating point numbers. Now I'll show you something else that you wanna see right here. Okay, so we're gonna have our integer divided by 2. Okay, so our integer divided by 2, let me actually just add a different print statement. So print, now we're gonna add bracket, my int divided is forward slash, by the way, divided by 2, and let's see what that gives us. You're expecting it to give us an integer, right? Well, no, weirdly not. It gives us a floating point number. Exactly what happens. Now when you divide, whatever you divide, okay, you always get a floating point number. Now let's try and multiply. Print my int times is asterisk 2. Okay, so what we get there, integer or a floating point number? We get an integer. Why do we get an integer? Because multiplying doesn't change our data type. Let's say print my float, my underscore float times by 2. So that should give us 41. So multiply by 2. That will actually give us a floating point numbers because our data type is already a floating point number. So this data types usually determines what you're gonna get as your answer. Okay, so you should already know about this. So this is plus, divide, and multiply. Minus is of course minus, that doesn't change. Okay, so let's move on to strings then. Now what you can see right here, actually I don't need to explain anything else. This right here is a string, so I'm just gonna put hashtag the string. So this right here is what we call a string. So a string is words, just put it in that way. Now a number can be determined as a string as well. How do we do that? Well, let's say my underscore str, okay, equals 300. Now in order to make this what we call a string, we then need to put all the words or numbers, whatever we want to convert into a string, under this, and now this is printed as an integer. Now as you can see, integer, as a string. Okay, so if we print this right now, so print once again my underscore str, that will give us a string. Okay, so as you can see right here, 300. But this doesn't look any different, does it? But watch till we do this. Now remember how we could add integers right here, and we could add them and get the answer in the terminal. Now watch this. We're gonna add my str to my int. Now that should work, right? Because I mean they're both numbers. Let's run that. Oh no, we get an error. Why? Well, let's read the error. Now this is very important. As a developer, we're gonna run through a lot of errors, and some of them are gonna be harder than others, some of them easier than others. Now we get a type error right here. Okay, now it can only concatenate str, not int. So what does that mean? Wow, if we have to get another str2 here, str2, oh wait, we don't need to get an str2 because we already have an str right there. Okay, so we already have this str right here, so I'm just gonna name this again once again so that you guys are clear with what we're doing. String, okay? So this is a string, that's a string. So we're gonna join the two sentences. This is also considered a sentence now because it's a string, okay? So we're gonna join these two strings together and watch what happens. Now remember how we got an error for wanting to add those two together. Now let's add this to A. Let's see what happens. Oh, guess what comes up? 300. My name is Anthony CJA. Basically what happened right here is we took this string, right? We put it into the terminal. So this string was 300. So we put it into the terminal. With that, we added another string into that string. So we joined the strings together with my name is Anthony CJA. Now we put those strings together and they come up as one thing, okay? So that's basically what happened right there. So now those are strings for you. We're gonna go into what we call booleans next. So booleans are quite simple to understand, okay? So we just gonna type hashtag boolean. Booleans are basically what we call true or false. That's what it is. That's basically all of it. So let's give it again another name. So my underscore bool equal true. So you need to use a capital letter here, and we just watch how we don't use the inverted commas right here. But if we say print my underscore bool, that will not give us an error. Why? Well, mainly because my bool is a boolean. It will give us true. Okay. So now what happens if you try to do this with a string? Well, let's see what happens. So let's say n is equal to my bool. What happens there? Let's try and run that. As you can see, we're already getting an error right here, and it's telling us my bool not defined, because it expects a variable to come in here if you're actually gonna make it equal to something that doesn't have a data type, because this right here does not have a data type. That's what's happening. Now if we run this right here, it will give us an error. Why? Because it is not defined. It is not known. Now things like these are booleans, and they are known by the programming language. Now of course we can say n equals false. Now booleans are something true and false. Those are booleans. That's it. So that's the only things you can put as booleans. Okay, so as you can see right here, we got true, and let's try again and say plus n. What do we get for that? We get 1. Why do we get 1? Well, the reason why we get 1 is because true plus false is known as 1. So let's say print right here. As you can see, we use print quite a lot because this is actually what we use in order to double check on knowledge in programming. So as you can see right here, we got print n equals false. That works perfectly. So those for you are data types. Now, how can we use data types? Well, I'm going to introduce to you guys something we call the input command or method. Input method is one of the basic things that a lot of people don't learn in the beginning, but this is one of the things that I want you guys to learn right now. Okay, so what is the input command? Okay, so we're gonna use all the things that we have used in this video in order to go over everything. So input command is something like input. So we type in input and then we open brackets. Now once we open brackets, we can put any string that you want here. So something like, okay, we actually need to put it under the inverted commas. So what is your name? Put a question mark if you wanted to. So what this does basically is it gives the user the option to enter an answer after the question. Okay, so now what we would love to do here is print that right now before we give it a variable so that you can see what it does. So we're going to print. Now when we want to print something, remember we put it in brackets. So we wrap it around brackets. So we're going to print that. And as you can see right here, what is your name? Well, my name is Ant. Enter. What happens? It just gets Ant and nothing happens because it's printing Ant. Why is it printing Ant, you may ask? Well, because we asked it to print what is your name. So it printed what is your name, and then it stores what is your name. It gets our name and then prints out the result of this whole thing, which it does right here. But the way this thing comes into use now is when you want to get users information, and this is how we'll do it. So we'd say name equal the user. Now we do that right there, right? So we run this program. What is your name? And what happens? Nothing. Why? Because we have stored our name in the variable name. So what can we do with this? Okay, let's just say age equal input open bracket. How old are you? Okay, so we ask the question now. Okay, now notice how I'm leaving a space every time after this right here. It's because we want to give the user indentation just like we did right here. So we don't type right against the question mark, okay? So now we've got the user's name, we've got the user's age. What can we do with this? Okay, let's see. We can run the print statement. Print name plus age. Okay, now here, what we can do also with this is add these spaces right here. Okay, so plus space plus age. So now this will just print out the user's name and user's age. Now this is I don't like teaching people this because this is like, I don't know, it's just not the right thing to teach someone. So we're gonna learn int, and we're gonna say int is 10, and voila, it prints out int and 10. So what I usually like teaching people is one more thing, and just bear in mind here, okay? So this might look a bit complicated, but it's not. So these are what we call f strings, okay? So now what are f strings? Now f strings make it way easier for us to put together different variables and strings in the same print line, okay? So we're gonna say print just like we did before, but then what we do here is put a f and then inverted commas again, right? And then what we do now, okay, we just say the user's name is, now we put curly brackets, two curly brackets, and then we put the variable that stores our name. So name, the user's name is name, and the user is, we put curly brackets again, and then we put our age variable right here, okay? Age, years old. Now what this will do right here is this will then print out this string right here as it is, the user's name is, and then to go ahead and look for the variable name. As you can see right here, it calls it name. So you go ahead and look for the variable name. So where is name right here? Oh, name is defined right here. Okay, so then you stored that name, remember? So now it's gonna put the name instead of the name variable into this. So okay, comma, it continues with the string, and the user is, oh, okay, we must go look for age. Now it goes to look for age. Age variable is defined right here. Oh, okay, remember it stored the user's age. Okay, so puts in the age right there and continues with the string. So let's run that program and see what happens. What is your name? Int. How old are you? 10. So as you can see what it says right here, the user's name is Ant and the user is 10 years old. Voila. Now just the mistake that I just noticed here, as you can see here, these things are actually quite tied together. So the mistake that I made, I put the space after the second inverted comma, which I was supposed to put it inside the whole string. That's basically the basics of Python, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson. I know this lesson was quite long, but please do hit that subscribe button if you want to learn how to code. This is my first tutorial on coding, and there'll be more tutorials coming in like this. Cheers.